All right. Hey, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us again. As you can see on the board here, it is week 2, day 3, and I am here with our Director of Special Education, Miss Ram.
Hello, everybody. Miss you all.
And so we are here to do the announcements, pledge, and joke. On this day, we don't really have any announcements. We're just continuing the online learning that you all have been doing. And so let's go ahead and cut over to Miss Ram for the joke of the day. Miss Ram.
So, what do you have? What do you call a fish without an eye?
I don't know, Miss Ram, what do you call a fish without an eye? Fish. Get it? Because there's no eye. I hope you got it. Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get ready for the pledge. Miss Ram, if you would help us out with that.
Oh, okay. All right. You ready?
Okay. Stand at attention, folks. Put your right hand over your heart. And let's get started.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you so much, Ms. Ram.
You're very
That was
welcome.
excellent of you. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and begin another wonderful day of our online learning. We'll see you on the internet. All right, hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is the agenda for every day this week. So I just put a little infinity sign on the day, and so I will probably just drop this little clip into the beginning of every day. So every day, I hope you're doing well. Every day, I hope that you are staying healthy, and every day, I hope that you're doing your homework. All right. Anyway, let's get to the lesson. All right. There we go. Okay. This is week 2, day 3, life skills. So this week we're talking about paradox in life skills. And so on day 1, we described kind of what a paradox is. On day 2, we talked a little bit more about how paradox occurs in nature. And on day 3 here, I want to talk about paradox and the meaning of life. The meaning of life is paradoxical. Everybody's life is different, and everybody loves different things, and that's okay. That's the way it always has been, and that's the way it should be. So there is no one grand meaning of life. And anybody who tells you that is probably trying to sell you something. So look out for that, okay? There is no one meaning of life. When I say meaning of life, I am really addressing what gives life meaning. So the paradox surrounding the meaning of life this morning, or whenever you're watching this, is the fact that life is both long and short at the same time. Life is precious because it is so short. But life at the same time is a long time. And so how can life be short and long at the same time? And why does that give life its meaning? Time is precious. If you and I lived forever, then time would not be precious. But we don't. The best we can hope for is 80 to 100 years. And the first couple of years and the last couple of years often aren't so great. And so really that gives us even less, maybe closer to 60 years. Okay? And because we only have 60 years of time in our life, the way we spend our time is valuable. It's precious. If you lived forever, time would mean nothing. If you lived forever, it wouldn't matter if you spent 100 or even 1,000 years with someone, because you have all of forever to spend that time. And so life is precious because it is so short. And if it were forever, life would lose much of its value and its meaning. But then at the same time, life is long. What does that mean? Sometimes, maybe right now, sitting at home watching the same shows over and over again, or sitting at home playing the same video games over and over again, or just being stuck where you are, that can seem like a very long time. And so, because life is long, it's important to learn patience. We have plenty of opportunities to learn patience, especially now. Being patient with your mother, being patient with your father, being patient with those around you as you are stuck in one place. Life feels like forever sometimes because of things that happen around us, because life is long. But paradoxically, it's over so quickly that life is short. In a few months from now, you all, most of you, will be in high school, and you won't have to listen to your teacher wax philosophical, especially on video. And you will be gone from Da Vinci Tree forever, and this part of your life will be but a very short chapter, because life is long, and this is only a very small part. But at the same time, life is short. For those of you who enjoy the time right now, it's going to be over so quickly. And so it's important to value that time. So again, as we close out the day's life skills lesson, I want you to understand the paradox of life that gives life its meaning. Time and life have value because life is so short. But it's important for us to practice patience because life is also a long time. I hope that that lesson was valuable, if not confusing for you. And I look forward to talking to you again about something philosophical tomorrow in our life skills class. All right, let's get back to it. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Current Events. Today is week 2, day 3, okay? So, let's talk here about this shortage of money, okay? And liquidity, okay? So, when we are in an economic expansion and things are growing, people need to buy things to continue growing businesses, okay? So, let's say that Amber has a business that sells boats, okay? Amber has a business that sells boats, and Amber has a lot of salespeople, okay? Let's say that Amber hires Carla to be one of her salespeople. When Carla comes to work for Amber, Amber needs to get Carla all of her equipment, okay? So Amber needs to buy Carla a new company shirt. Amber needs to buy Carla maybe a company phone. Maybe if Carla uses a computer, Amber needs to buy her a new computer. So all those things that Amber has to buy to have Carla working for her, okay, are things that her business needs to purchase because they're growing, okay? So when businesses are growing and an economy is expanding, people are buying things, okay? And people who are selling things, so let's say for example, let's see here, who else is going to be watching this? Okay, let's say that Aurora wants to sell a bunch of computers. Okay, if Aurora has a bunch of used computers that she's trying to sell, and the economy is expanding, okay, the businesses are growing. Aurora has a bunch of used computers that she's trying to turn into money. She's trying to use the liquidity of the computer to turn it into cash money, okay? As she puts the ad out there saying, hey, Craigslist people, Amazon people, I'm selling these used computers, other companies like Amber's company, who needs to buy a new computer for their new employee, will find Aurora's computer ad. And Amber will reach out to Aurora and say, hey, Aurora, I need some computers. You have some used computers. I would like to buy your used computers. So because the economy is growing and Amber's business is also growing, okay, it's easy for Aurora to sell her used stuff. Aurora's computers in an expansion have more liquidity than they do in a contraction. So let's talk about it. If Aurora is trying to sell those exact same computers, except these used computers are being sold in a contraction time instead of an expansion, those computers have less liquidity. Because Aurora puts her ad online and says, hey world, I'm trying to sell maybe these 20 computers that are lightly used. They're new, they're in good condition, they're lightly used. They're a lot cheaper than buying new computers, but they are, they're a little bit used, so I'm discounting the price. If the economy is contracting and everything is getting smaller, guess what? There's going to be a lot of other people out there who are also trying to sell used computers, okay? If the economy is getting smaller, do you think Amber is going to be selling a bunch of boats from her boat company? No, she's not. And so if the economy is getting smaller, instead of Amber hiring Carla and a bunch of new people to work at the boat company to sell more boats, Amber's going to be firing people probably because she cannot afford to pay them. So in a contraction, kids, the value of things and the liquidity of things goes down. It's harder to sell equipment in a contraction because that equipment has less liquidity because fewer people want it in a contraction, okay? And that's why one of the symptoms of a recession or a depression is a shortage of money and a liquidity crisis, okay? People cannot turn their goods into liquid money as easily as they can in an expansion, okay? So that's the first really big part of this, okay? The second part of this has to do with the way that banks worked.
I have a question.
Yes, Miss Kimmy.
Why can't we just go print some more money?
That's a good question.
So.
Now, in some cases we can.
I mean legally.
In some cases, well,
Oh, okay.
in some cases the government can actually do that. And that's actually one of the things that the government is thinking about doing. But let's talk for a moment about scarcity, okay? The dollar bills that you have in your wallet or that your parents have on their debit cards, those dollars don't have any inherent value. What that means is, kids, if you were taking a walk outside and aliens abducted you, and you went back to the aliens' ship, and the aliens' ship, they asked you for something of value, and you had a Jolly Rancher in your pocket, and you had a $100 bill in your pocket. The Jolly Rancher would be worth more than the $100 bill, because the Jolly Rancher is sweet, it has caloric value, there's actually sugar in there that can be used for energy, okay? And again, it's delicious. So that Jolly Rancher has some kind of intrinsic value, okay? The $100 bill in your pocket would have no value. It's a piece of paper that's woven with cotton, and that's all it is, okay? And so the money that we have in our system today, kids, is only valuable because it is scarce and people want it. Again, money today is a lot like trading cards. Again, like a baseball card or a basketball card or even a Pokemon card. The only reason why these things have any value at all is because some people have them and there aren't that many of them and other people want them. But there's no actual value in them, okay? And so again, the reason why $1 is worth $1 is only because we don't have that many of them, okay? Now, we'll talk a little bit more about the idea of scarcity tomorrow, and I'm really glad that Ms. Kimmy asked that question because that was actually maybe the topic for day 4 or 5 anyway. Actually, it was day 5, but that's okay. Thanks for giving me it.
I got a little ahead of
So-
myself.
so-
Inflation.
So we can change, and so we're going to be talking about scarcity, and we will be talking about inflation and how that fits in with the idea of having a shortage of money and having a liquidity crisis. So again, I hope today's discussion helped you understand a little bit better about liquidity and how liquidity can change, okay? In expansionary period for the economy, when the economy is expanding, things become more liquid because more people are buying and selling, okay? In a contraction period, things become much less liquid because everybody's selling and not that many people are buying. All right, I hope that was helps you understand a little bit more about this today. And tomorrow, again, we're going to be reviewing this and talking about the concept of scarcity. Thank you. All right, today is week 2, day 3. And today in American history, we're telling the story of the death of Abraham Lincoln. So, sometime last week, I don't remember what day it was, I talked to you a little bit about the incredible amount of stress that Lincoln was under on a literal daily basis. Lincoln had the weight of the world on his shoulders in a way that you and I will never, ever understand. And so when you have that much stress in your life, to keep from having a nervous breakdown, it's important to have different releases for stress. And so Abraham Lincoln had several releases for stress. One relief for stress was that he spent a lot of time at his best friend's house, okay? So you might remember that Abraham Lincoln had a best friend from when he was growing up, and that guy's name was Joshua Speed. And Joshua Speed was a rich guy from Kentucky who owned a general store, and he was roommates with Lincoln for many years. And so every now and again, Lincoln would have a little bit of time, once or twice a year, to spend a little bit of time with Joshua Speed, and they would hang out. But Lincoln's new best friend was his Secretary of State, Henry Seward. And so Henry Seward, who remember was his greatest rival for the presidency, would hang out with Abraham Lincoln every single night. In fact, Lincoln and Seward would often joke that they definitely spent more time with each other than they did with their wives and kids, which was very true. And so Seward had this really nice big mansion, and in the mansion he had this really comfortable study with these large cozy couches. And Washington, D.C., it gets very hot and very cold. And so in the study he had these walls and walls of bookshelves, like these big, beautiful wooden, custom-made bookshelves that were there. And so on a cold Washington, D.C. night, Abraham Lincoln, after supper, would go over to Seward's house. Abraham Lincoln famously never drank and he never cursed. And it almost sounds like one of those things like George Washington, where he threw the stone over the mountains and he chopped down the cherry tree, which are not true, but they're popular myths. But that's actually true. Abraham Lincoln almost never swore, and he didn't drink. As you might recall, Abraham Lincoln grew up with a really terrible dad who left him for over a year when he was only 9 years old. And so Abraham Lincoln's father drank a lot, and he was illiterate. And so although Lincoln loved his dad, he didn't want to be like him. And so he decided from a young age that he wouldn't drink or swear because he wanted to distance himself from his father. And so Lincoln would go over to Seward's house, and that was a big way that he relieved stress. So every night Seward would be drinking some cognac or something like that, and Lincoln, with his long and awkward arms, he would stretch out on the big couch and put his feet up right in front of the fire, and they would just sit and laugh and tell stories for hours until it was time to go to bed. And usually around that time, Lincoln would be walking home around, midnight or 1 in the morning, getting ready to wake up at 7 o'clock the next morning and do it all over again. And so that was one of Lincoln's biggest ways where he helped kind of release all of that stress and that tension of having all these pressures on him all the time. He had a really good support network of friends. Also, too, if you remember Secretary of War Stanton lived in the War Department. He would literally sleep there at nights. He was the dude who's kind of like a little pudgy, and he had the beard, right? And so he would be there at all hours of the day and night, and he was really asthmatic, and so sometimes he would get sick and he'd literally have to sleep on the couch just so he avoided having an asthma attack and dying. And as many of you already know, because you did the presentation on him, that's that ended killing him before he got on the Supreme Court after he was appointed to it. But anyway, at this point in time, Stanton was also up at all hours of the day and night at the War Department. And so that's another thing Lincoln would do, was to just kind of unwind and get rid of some stress. Lincoln would often go to the War Department. And so at the War Department, they used to have these big long cables, and the cables would come in bringing the news, and it was all in Morse code using the telegraph. And so you'd have these young men there who were having to be there 24/7, and so they would take shifts and whatever, but there would always be a couple guys at the War Department making sure that they stayed awake, waiting for the buzzing of the telegram, or the telegraph, to give them news from the front of the war. And so one of the things that Lincoln would do to relieve stress is when he wasn't going over to his buddy Seward's house, he would go the opposite direction after leaving the White House, and he'd walk down to the War Department to visit with Stanton, again, who was there all night. And as you recall, Stanton was not a big fan of Lincoln's stories. Lincoln would start going off in the story, and Stanton would be like, all right, I'm taking a nap. But Stanton's young men who were there at the telegraph office were always excited to see Lincoln and hear his stories. So Lincoln would go down there and spend hours just telling stories and talking about family and telling jokes and stuff like that. Lincoln was a big guy for jokes. And so those are the main ways that he would relieve his stress. Now, on a special occasion, usually, I don't know, once every week or two, he liked to go to the theater. And there were two theaters in Washington, D.C. that were very popular. And one of those two theaters was Ford's Theater. And so Lincoln made a habit of going to Ford's Theater. He'd try to get down there at least once a month, sometimes more. And he was a big fan of all the different plays. Now you have to remember that Lincoln grew up on the countryside. He grew up on a farm, okay? He grew up without good books. He grew up without all the nice things that other people had. And so moving to Washington, D.C., for one of the first times in his whole life, he was exposed to an entire world of theater. And again, he hadn't grown up watching any plays, and he'd barely grown up having good books. And so now that he was the President of the United States, he basically had an unlimited use of the theater whenever he wanted. And it was a great way for him to, again, get out the anxiety of having like the well-being of the entire country on his shoulders. And so he went to the theater often. Now, one of his very favorite actors, okay, and in fact, the most famous actor in all of the country at this period of time was a guy named Edwin Booth. And so Edwin Booth would often come and perform in Washington, D.C. He didn't live there. He would come through town, right? And when Edwin Booth would come through town, the president always wanted to see him because he was excellent. And in fact, Edwin Booth, when he would come through town, if you all remember Secretary of the Treasury, Chase, Salmon P. Chase, okay? Chase's daughter, Kate Chase, was the most famous woman in America at the time, and she was kind of like everyone's favorite politician's daughter, if that's a thing. And so she would hold these really lavish parties, right? And so whenever Edwin Booth would come to town, he would stay at Salmon Chase's house, and they would throw this giant party, and everybody would come to it. And then Abraham Lincoln would always make sure that he went to those parties, and he would see Edwin Booth's shows, okay? And so Edwin Booth had a younger brother, John. And so John Wilkes Booth, Edwin Booth's younger brother, was also a talented actor. But the thing about him was he had sympathies for the South. He was not completely right in the head in many ways. And he hated what Lincoln was doing by beating the South in the Civil War. And so after the surrender of General Lee at the courthouse in Appomattox, John Wilkes Booth, little brother of Edwin Booth, went a little nuts. And he hatched an assassination attempt to try to overthrow the Union government in hopes that it would make things better for the South. And so he decided that he was going to try to assassinate 3 key members of the president's administration. I believe, and you know what, I should have looked this up before we started recording, but it was Lincoln, it was Seward, and I believe it was also Stanton. And so he was going to assassinate, do you remember this story, Miss Kimmy? I don't know if you're listening. Was it Stanton?
Stanton.
It was Stanton, okay. And so he was going to try in one night to kill all three of them and cripple the North. Short. Yeah, it was an epic conspiracy, except this conspiracy, unlike many others, was true. And it largely worked. And so John Wilkes Booth and his three friends planned a coordinated attack. John Wilkes Booth would take on the president because he knew that he would show up to the show that was playing at Ford's Theater. His other friend would attack Seward at his home, and they knew that Seward was going to be at his home. So what had happened was, unfortunately, Henry Seward was in an accident. Now, back then, they didn't have cars. They had horse-drawn carriages. So Henry Seward had been in a carriage accident. And it was a severe accident that left him crippled in bed for at least a period of time. And so they knew where he was, and they knew where he would be. He would be at home, recovering from an accident. And then, like I already told you, Stanton was a bit of a workaholic. And so he was always either at the War Department or he was at home. And so he was also an easy target because everybody knew who he was. Now, kids, it's important to remember that at this period of time, we did not have the FBI. The president did not walk around with armed bodyguards. In fact, very famously, the White House kept its doors unlocked most of the time. And so people from off the street could literally be like, oh, there's the White House. I should go see what's inside. And they would just walk right in. And in fact, that's how a lot of things got stolen in the White House, because people would literally walk in and be like, oh, that's some nice carpet there, and I would like a souvenir. And so they'd take a knife and they would cut out a piece of carpet from the White House and they'd take it home and be like, hey, honey, look at this. It's a piece of the White House. And so that's how the White House got ruined. And that's why today you are not allowed to walk unaccompanied in the White House. You have to go on a tour, and there are guards everywhere and stuff like that, because people steal crap, okay? And so,
I've done that.
oh, you've stolen from the White House, Miss Kimmy?
No, I've actually had a tour of the White
Oh,
House.
so
with
she-
guard. Yeah, I actually had a tour
She never stole anything from the
during
White House.
Obama's.
So
Believe me.
she
you
had a
don't do
tour.
that.
She didn't steal anything.
Not at all.
So, but yeah, and so back then that wasn't the case, okay? And so, as you know, as the story goes, as you've heard since you were young, okay, at Ford's Theater, while the president was in his booth with his wife watching the play, John Wilkes Booth came up from behind, put the gun to his head, and fired. President Lincoln did not die instantaneously, which is regrettable. He slumped over in his chair. John Wilkes Booth, wanting to show off and be like, I did it, I'm the guy who killed the president just now. Again, he was an actor, and so lots of ego. He takes the president's booth, which is on the second floor, and he jumps from the president's booth down to the stage in order to show off. And when he does that, he breaks his ankle because he's kind of a dumb guy. And so he breaks his ankle. He stands up, and he's like, I'm okay, and he's like, ah, and he shouts his phrase, and then he runs away, okay, and Lincoln's not dead, which is really gross and sad. Lincoln continues to breathe, he continues to live, and they didn't have good medical technology back then at all, okay. We're going to hear the story of the assassination of James Garfield coming up here pretty soon, and you'll understand kind of how tragic medical science was back then when we talk about that. And so they drag Lincoln's half-alive body into basically a hotel next door across the street. Lincoln is so big that he can't even fit in the bed. And he's such a tall man. And so Lincoln, this great man, one of the greatest people to ever live, is pathetically lying in a bed, surrounded by all of his closest friends, surrounded by his son Robert and Stanton. And again, Stanton was a very serious man, but he is just weeping uncontrollably. Chase wasn't there. He was at home. He didn't make it. He wasn't called until the next morning. They were actually afraid that Chase was going to be assassinated as well, because he had just been appointed to be Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And so after Lincoln was shot, Chase was put on house arrest under guard because they were afraid for his life. So his family was there, his wife was there, again, weeping uncontrollably, and she already had a problem with mental health and depression, and so it was a pathetic scene. And it's regrettable that Lincoln had to continue to live for that long as he bled out onto that small bed. At that very same moment, though, his best friend, Henry Seward, while he was recovering at home, was attacked. And so the person that broke into the Seward's house attacked with a knife. And now the Sewards had guards in their home. There were 2 soldiers in the home that were protecting the Sewards because they already knew that Secretary of State Seward was vulnerable after his carriage accident. And so the attacker came in the door pretending to be, I think, a delivery person, and he was delivering medicine. He said, "I have medicine to deliver to Secretary of State Seward." And the person at the door, who was Seward's son, was like, "Great, give me the medicine, I'll bring it up to Dad, we're done." And he's like, "No, the doctor says I have to give it to him, and you can't." And the son's like, "I don't know about that, doesn't sound right." And so after the man is refused, he takes out his knife and he starts slashing. And he killed, I believe, 2 of Seward's kids. He injured both of the soldiers. I think he might have killed one. And it was a bloodbath. I believe there were 7 people who were slashed almost to death in that one night. And the attacker attacked poor Henry Seward in his already crippled state. So he was already crippled from the carriage accident. And then he had this giant scar across his face for the rest of his life because of this knife attack. And so he was not killed, though. Seward survived. And Seward lived for quite a few years after this. But in his broken state, nobody wanted to tell him that his president and best friend, Abraham Lincoln, had been assassinated. And Henry Seward, who was a very intelligent man, when he finally gained consciousness after losing all of that blood, nobody would tell him. His son wouldn't tell him, but he figured it out. After about a day and a half, Henry Seward looked at his son and said, "Hey, how come the president hasn't come to visit me yet? He's here every day." After Henry Seward had the carriage accident, Abraham Lincoln came to visit him every single morning to see how he was doing. And on the second morning where Abraham Lincoln hadn't visited, he turned to his son, he says, "Son, what are you not telling me?" And then later in the day, the church bell started ringing in honor of Abraham Lincoln. And Seward just looked out the window and started crying because he knew that his friend had died. And so that is the story of how Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. Oh, I forgot the third one, okay? The third friend, who was there to get Stanton, he chickened out and ran away. So he never followed through with the plan. So anyway, thus ends the story of Abraham Lincoln. In class, we talked about his legacy. We talked about things that have happened from his presidential administration other than the Civil War. We talked about Seward and Thurlow Weed's influence over Tammany Hall and what happened there. We talked about Stanton's modernization of the Army and what that meant for Americans moving forward. We talked about Gideon Welles and his techniques to increase American naval power and how that helped Undersecretary of the Navy Theodore Roosevelt in later years to win the Spanish-American War. And so there are many lasting impacts of Abraham Lincoln other than slavery and the Civil War that continue with us to this day. But it is a tragedy of how his life ended. Now, just to review for his family did not have a happy ever after, okay? As I recall, so he had 3 sons, okay? His oldest son was Robert, and his middle son was Tad, and his youngest boy was Willie. Am I getting that right, Miss Kimmy? Do you remember?
I believe Tad is right.
And Tad, so Robert was oldest, then Tad, and then Willie. And little Willie died while the president was in office. And so Willie died I believe, wasn't it a coronavirus that killed him? He died of illness. It wasn't COVID-19, obviously. That was discovered in 2019.
Probably ear infection. Lots of
yeah,
people
back
died
then.
from that stuff.
Yeah, it was like a respiratory or some kind of infection, and so Willie died of that, and that's when Mrs. Lincoln kind of fell into depression, and then Abraham Lincoln died, and that made her depression worse, and not long after that, Tad also died of disease, and I think he was somewhere between 19 and 21. He didn't last very long. So the only remaining son of Abraham Lincoln to continue was Robert Lincoln. And so Robert Lincoln continued, and he actually went into law and politics after his father. And so Robert Lincoln was actually a friend of James Garfield, the 20th president. And when James Garfield was shot and died, I think 6 to 9 months later from his illness or his injury, Robert Lincoln was there. Robert Lincoln was also part of the cabinet for William McKinley, who was also assassinated. And it was his assassination that is the reason why Theodore Roosevelt became president. And so Lincoln's legacy of his family is really only found through Robert. And Robert lived a life of tremendous tragedy from being there and helping kind of shepherd the United States through all of these traumas repeated over and over again, beginning with his father in the Civil War, and then with losing everyone's favorite president, James Garfield. And James Garfield really was everyone's favorite president. He was amazing. And then, of course, transitioning the cabinet of William McKinley over to Theodore Roosevelt. And so again, Lincoln had many legacies that he left us, not just the ones that you see at the memorial in DC, but his personal story was a sad one at the end of his life. All right, that's it for week 2, day 3. All right, guys, it's literature week 2, day 3. And so you should have read the chapter 47 degrees, 17 degrees. So I actually had to go back and reread these chapters because we are getting right smack dab into the end of this book. And to be honest with you, at the end of the book, all the chapters totally blend together for me. And so I needed to make sure that we were giving a brief summary of the correct chapter and not jumping ahead to spoil any endings for you. Excuse me. So in this chapter, we find ourselves going to Newfoundland, or Newfoundland, yeah. And the guys do a little bit of fishing towards the beginning of the chapter, and then they come across the transatlantic telegraph cable. And so, kids, today we don't use satellites for all of our communication. We do have some communication over satellite. But most of our communication today is done over cable. And this was the first such cable that was laid between Europe and North America. And so the cables today that are based off of this cable that they describe in the book, which is a real cable, mostly today they're fiber optic. And so today these same cables underneath the Atlantic, they carry server loads and different communication across the sea. So, for instance, if you were to say, if you were to watch a Japanese cartoon on the internet, if that cartoon was coming from a server in Japan, when you would look it up online and access their website, your computer would be communicating using a fiber optic cable, most likely going underwater through the Pacific, to a server in Japan where the cartoon was held. And so that is absolutely a way that things work today. And so again, we have satellites, but these fiber optic cables carry much more information than satellite transmissions. And so again, in the book, they come across the first, like the great-great-granddaddy of these cables, the transatlantic telegraph cable. And so Aronnax talks about how it was laid, and I forget what the date was, but I think the cable was only laid a few years before. And so that cable's pretty new, and everybody knew about it back then because it was big news. Okay, and so that happened in the book. Oh no, I don't want to get into the next chapter, and so I don't remember where to end. Give me a second. Okay, sorry, I had to flip open the book. Okay, so they're not sure what the Nautilus is doing because the Nautilus is kind of going around and around in circles, and it's not quite making a ton of sense. And they're not sure what's going on. And then they find a wreckage of a ship, and Captain Nemo gives them like the history of that ship, and it turns out it was a French boat, and it was a boat that had fought in the American Revolution, and then it had come back and fought in a European war, and it was sunk. And so he was kind of like honoring that ship, and so Aronnax begins kind of putting together this puzzle of who Nemo is, and it turns out that Nemo is very patriotic, and maybe that is kind of powering some of his motivation. And so really Aronnax, again, as we come to the end of the book, he begins to understand that Captain Nemo is not this idyllic scientific explorer that we initially thought he might be. Captain Nemo is more of a deeply emotional man with a plan, I guess you could say, and he is a little bit rogue. Yeah. Anyway, let's get to the next chapter. The next chapter is called A Massacre. And here is, things have already started going south, and this is when things get real bad. All right, so read the chapter A Massacre for your homework tonight, and that'll be it for literature today. And I'll see you back here tomorrow. Thank you. It's week 2, day number 3, and it is time for science. Okay, for science today, we are talking about the concept of friction. Now, there are many ways to teach the concept of friction. Today, to begin, I was trying, touch the face, gosh. Okay, to make it interesting today, I wanted to begin our conversation about friction with something that would grab your attention. Now, it is a sad fact of life, kids, that people often enjoy seeing other people get hurt. It's a gross tendency in human nature. But it does get our attention. You're a human, I'm a human, let's watch someone get hurt. So, this guy is on a tree somewhere without a shirt on, he is above a river, and he's about to get hurt. Let's see if you can predict what's going to happen to him before it does, and how he's about to be injured.
It's entirely possible that he will swing into that branch.
He's going to hit the branch. We did not hit the branch. If you guessed rope burn because you read the title in the top left, you were correct. This poor man has been burned by a rope. Whew.
How did you Mr. Rockburn?
I had to stop it there because he dropped a bad word. Anyway, yeah, so today we're talking about friction. That man just got a rope burn, okay? The concept of friction does a lot of things for us. Friction keeps you and myself from just kind of sliding away all the time, because friction keeps us put solidly on the ground because of gravity and the friction between our feet, or maybe in this case, my behind and the chair, okay? It keeps us where we are. So friction can be good, and in most cases, it is good. But friction can also be bad, and can cause somebody who is jumping off a tree pain as they slide down a rope. Friction is caused by the tiny imperfections in even the most perfect surfaces. When two surfaces rub against each other, these tiny imperfections get caught upon one another, and as the rubbing occurs, they generate heat. Okay? When you are cold outside and you rub your hands together to make heat, you are creating heat using friction. Okay? So let's read a little bit about friction. Then at the very end of the class today, I have kind of a fun video that's not of somebody getting hurt to show you. Okay, so friction. When you push a book across a table, the surface of the book rubs against the surface of the table. In the same way, the skin of a firefighter's hands rubs against the polished metal pole as she slides down. Although surfaces may seem quite smooth, they actually have many irregularities. When two surfaces rub, the irregularities of one surface get caught on those of the other surface. The force that the one surface exerts on another when the two rub against each other is called friction. Okay, and then right here under figure 7, okay, if you look at a polished metal surface under a special microscope, you'll find that it is actually quite rough. What would a rough surface look like? So this is a polished metal surface under a microscope. You can see that to our naked eye, it looks very smooth and polished, but when you look at it under the microscope, you begin to see every tiny imperfection. And again, these imperfections, catching the other imperfections in another surface, is what causes this friction. All right, let's read about the nature of friction. Friction acts in a direction opposite to the object's direction of motion. Without friction, the object would continue to move at constant speed forever. Now remember Newton's laws, okay? We talked the other day about Newton's laws. An object at rest tends to stay at rest. An object in motion tends to stay in motion. Now I used an example of tape the other day, and I said, well, if I move the tape, it's at rest until an outside force, my fingers, move it around, okay? So somebody might have asked yesterday while you were watching that, well, Mr. Roll, since an object in motion tends to stay in motion unless acted upon by an outside force, how come this little tape doesn't just keep on going forever when you let it go? The answer is friction, okay? The friction of the bottom of the tape against my wooden desk here keeps it from going on forever, okay? Oops. All right. The strength of the force of the friction depends on two factors: the type of surface involved and how hard the surfaces push together. Okay? Rough surfaces produce greater friction than smooth surfaces. The skiers right here in figure 8 get a fast ride because there is very little friction between their skis and the snow. The reindeer would not be able to pull them easily over rough surfaces such as sand. The force of friction also increases if the surfaces push harder against each other. If you rub your hands together forcefully, there is more friction than if you rub your hands together lightly. Isn't this cool? I have to assume this is in Canada. Anyway, maybe it's not. Maybe it's here in the States. But you see, kids, there's a force exerted on the skiers by these reindeer here, and there's the force of friction. And the force of friction here comes in two ways. Oh, they're in Finland. Ha! All I had to do was read. Who would have guessed? All right, so the force in friction comes from two different things here. One, they have friction against the surface of the snow, okay? Two, they have friction from the air. The air actually offers resistance, okay? The air offers resistance, and as you all know, depending on how much friction or resistance is being built up, it can even create some heat, okay? All right, let's go to the next page up here. Boop, boop, boop. Friction, useful or not? Okay, is friction necessarily a bad thing? No. Whether or not friction is useful depends on the situation. You're able to walk, for example, because friction acts between the soles of your shoes and the floor. Without friction, your shoes would only slide across the floor, and you would never move forward. An automobile moves because of friction between its tires and the road. Thanks to friction, you can light a match, and you can walk on the sidewalk. So again, friction enables all of our daily activities. Okay, I don't know if you guys do these things on a daily basis, but you get what I mean. Friction is so useful that at times people want to increase it. If you're walking down a snow-covered hill, you might wear rubber boots or spread sand to increase the friction and slow you down. Ballet dancers spread a sticky powder on on the soles of their shoes so that they do not slip on the dance floor. Controlling friction. There are different kinds of friction. When solid surfaces slide over each other, the kind of friction that occurs is called sliding friction, okay? So remember, sliding friction is for solid surfaces, sliding friction. When an object rolls over a surface, the kind of friction that occurs is rolling friction, okay? So rolling friction and sliding friction. Rolling friction is like a tire, okay? sliding friction is like a sled going down a hill. The force needed to overcome rolling friction is much less than the force needed to overcome sliding friction, okay? You may remember from last week we had a silly example of a little EV who was pushing a car across a desk, okay? One car was right side up and it had rolling friction. It was very easy. The other car was upside down and had sliding friction. It was very hard. So it took EV more force to displace the car in the correct amount. Therefore, EV had to produce more work, okay? Again, sliding friction and rolling friction usually provides less resistance. Sliding friction usually provides more resistance. Oh, I keep on going back to that guy. It's like he's calling me. Anyway, the force needed to overcome rolling friction is much less than the force needed to overcome sliding friction, which is something that you maybe understand intuitively, like from our example. Ball bearings are one way of reducing friction between two surfaces. Ball bearings are small, smooth steel balls. The balls roll between rotating metal parts. The wheels of inline skates, skateboards, and bicycles all have ball bearings. Many auto parts have ball bearings as well, okay? So let's take a second and watch a quick video about ball bearings. I'm going to pause this video so I can bring it up. Oh, bad news, good news. Bad news, the video I was going to show you about how a ball bearing works, actually I'm not allowed to show on here because it's not in the Creative Commons. The good news is I did a little bit of digging and I think I can still explain it to you so you can understand what a ball bearing is. So again, a ball bearing is a device that's been around for a really long time that we find in things, you know, all the way from some vehicles to, you know, roller skates and in a lot of places that you wouldn't even think, sometimes even in buildings to help them protect against earthquakes. So a ball bearing turns the sliding friction into rolling friction to reduce the friction. And if you've ever gone roller skating or roller blading before, you've used ball bearings. So let's go ahead and kind of explain what they are in terms of friction. So this is a cutaway of a ball bearing right here. And as you can see, a ball bearing is called a ball bearing because it has all these little balls on the inside of it. And so these balls roll around and around in a circle. And so the inside of the circle can stay totally still while the outside of the circle is like rotating around it. Okay, so again, inside of the circle is still, outside of the circle is rotating around it, and the little balls are rolling around the outside. And so a ball bearing can support weight while spinning. Okay, it's this really cool thing. And so here's a video, and you can actually, if you look closely, this is a broken ball bearing, but you can still see the spinning action on the skateboard wheel here. Okay? Again, sorry kids, I got to work with what I'm allowed to work with in terms of copyrights and stuff. So you can actually see, do you see the little ball right in there? Okay, you can see the little balls in the ball bearing, okay, of this skateboard wheel, okay? And so those little balls, they turn around, and so the skateboard is able to support weight. And because this ball bearing is broken, you can kind of see inside of the bearing itself. Now, normally you're not supposed to be able to see it, okay? Normally the bearing is sealed, so you can't really see it. And the other video I had a really cool cutaway of one actually spinning, but we can't show it, sorry. So anyway, that's how a ball bearing works, kids, and that's how it changes the friction levels to be a rolling friction level. So it's really, really easy to, you know, to get around, okay? All right, so, oh, whoops, wrong one. All right, so ball bearings are one way that works. Friction that occurs when an object moves through a liquid or gas is called fluid friction. The force needed to overcome fluid friction is usually less than that needed to overcome sliding friction. The fluid keeps surfaces from making direct contact and thus reduces friction. The moving parts of machines are bathed in oil so that they can slide past each other with less friction. Okay? Now, even though there is fluid friction in terms of the air and the water, this friction can still be pretty crazy. Okay? Now, again, for science, you know, you don't need to worry too much about homework here. I'm going to cut today's lesson a little bit short by showing you a video, okay? This is a video of fluid friction in the air. So fluid friction happens both in the air and it happens in the water, okay? So whether you're air or water, the gas acts like like a fluid, okay? So even planes going through the air, that's fluid friction, okay? If you've ever heard of a sonic boom, when an aircraft passes the sound barrier and it creates a loud, like a thunder crash that can that can shatter windows, that thunder crash is from the fluid dynamics of that thing going through the air really fast, and the way that the friction of the gas beating against the plane works. It creates like a ripple, almost like a ripple in a pond. But today I just want to show you about friction, okay? So I think I'm rambling on and on, but basically friction can create heat, okay? When you rub your hands together, it gets really hot, okay? When you have a rug burn because your friend is dragging you across the carpet as you were trying to get up, okay, you can burn yourself. So friction creates heat, even friction with the air itself, okay? So here's a video from NASA that I think is kind of cool, and it shows friction from the drag
being controlled by somebody on the ground in mission control. We always like to talk about how in mission control over in Houston, that's where they actually fly the space station. That's where they control everything from the cameras and the communication to even the thermostat on board the space station. If it's too hot for the crew, they talk to the ground, and they're the ones who can turn the AC up. But so it's actually somebody at a console right now who's controlling those cameras, sending commands just to move all the pan, tilt, focus, everything else. They're doing it from a console on Earth while the thing is flying 250 statute miles over the Earth on the other side of the planet.
Like Dan mentioned before, we're going really fast right now. We're at about 17,500 miles per hour, so everything is moving very quickly. The need to readjust the cameras very frequently is inherent due to the high velocities that we're dealing with.
So again, they're going 17,000 miles per hour, but they're in outer space. And so as soon as they come down into the atmosphere, they have to go through the air.
And so this is a view from that WB-57 airplane. You were looking at Dragon streaking across the sky on its re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere, aiming for a splashdown in just a little while from now.
So do you guys see that? When it
It's pretty
enters the
exciting
Earth's
that we get
atmosphere,
this shot right now as
when it enters the Earth's atmosphere, it lights up almost like a firecracker, because that is the friction of the air burning itself against the capsule as it charges through the atmosphere. Okay?
Rare treat to be able to see this here. And again, this video is coming from a NASA airplane that we're flying around that recovery zone there, a WB-57. It's commonly used for a lot of atmospheric studies and other science missions, but able to put a tracking camera on it to try and get this re-entry through the Earth's atmosphere today. We're hearing that they should have AOSO acquisition of signal back with the Dragon spacecraft. Right now it's about 46 kilometers in.
So it's going 17,000 miles an hour, and once it enters Earth's atmosphere and eventually lands, you don't want to land a spacecraft at 17,000 miles an hour. You will die. And so as it charges through the atmosphere here, the friction of the air is slowing it down. And once it hits the correct altitude, it has to deploy its parachutes. Whoa, there we go, right on schedule, okay? And the parachutes increase the wind resistance, they increase the friction with the atmosphere, and they allow the capsule to slow down, slow down, slow down, until finally it's going slow enough that it can touch down in the ocean. It lands in the water, and it has a soft fluid landing in the water. So again, it's all about decelerating, slowing down, using the friction of the atmosphere, both as it's re-entering and it gets, again, hot like a firework, and then later on as the different series of parachutes open up to create more friction with the wind, more resistance, more wind and air resistance, until, again, it's going slow enough where it can touch down at a good speed, okay? All right, let's see. That's it for science today. Yeah, you snuck in. So that's it for science today. I will see you tomorrow. If there's any questions on your worksheet that you can answer, go ahead and answer those questions. Goodbye. Say goodbye, Mars. Bye. Mr. Roll here for week 2, day number 3. Okay, so During week 2, day 2, you were learning about how to do the area of a trapezoid. I gave you some Khan Academy assignments that you need to have done, and I also gave you a practice worksheet with all the answers. It was the exact same worksheet that we did live on the video. And I left all my notes in there so you can kind of pick through the messy scribbles that I left you. Today, we're going to keep it real brief. So today, we are continuing to do area of a trapezoid. You have a worksheet assigned to you today. The worksheet that's assigned to you today is for credit. You need to turn it in to Mr. Barbero when you're done with it. Okay, so take a photo of it or whatnot if you're in my class, because it is for credit. If you're not in my class, give it a try anyway. If you email Mr. Barbero and you're not in my class, tell us where you're from, maybe send us a picture, and we will send you the answer sheet to go along with it so you can check yourself. We just need to make sure that you're not one of my students cheating. Bum, bum. Anyway, let's go ahead and review area of a trapezoid from yesterday, and then let's get to what we're doing today. Again, it's going to be pretty short, though. All right, so yesterday we were talking about area of a trapezoid, okay? It combines the areas of rectangles and triangles. At the beginning yesterday, we reviewed the area of a circle, okay? Area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height, and then area of a rectangle is just the width times the length, okay? All right, so today we are going to continue doing the area of a trapezoid, okay? So it's the exact same lesson as yesterday. If you don't remember how to do it, please go back to yesterday's video and re-watch the math portion, because we are moving on, okay? So today what I need to review before I leave you to do your homework is multiplying and dividing with decimals, okay? Multiplying, whoops, and dividing with decimals, okay? I know this is a skill that you all learned, like probably maybe in 4th grade or sooner, and I don't think any of you are dumb. What I do think, though, is that I think that we all have been kind of working from home a lot lately, and you know, our brains just kind of slowly forget things and turn to mush a little bit. So when we're multiplying with decimals, we're just going to do a couple examples. Let's say I have 3.04 times 2.9. Okay, if I'm doing a problem like this, I don't have to line up my decimals. I can just go 3.04 times 2.9, just like that. And I actually kind of ignore the decimals and I just do the problem. Okay, so I just take 9 times 4 is 36, 3 up there. 9 times 0 is 0, drop the 3, whoops. And then 9 times 3 is 27, cool, okay. Then I go over to the next one. I say 2 times 4 is 8. Oh, whoops. I got to include my placeholder 0. Almost forgot that. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 3 is 6. Add them all together. Boom. 6, 11, 8, 8. Just like that. Okay? And so after I have done that, oh, you know what? Because I'm broadcasting live, oh, this is your homework for the night. Because I'm broadcasting live and I just made up this problem, let's make sure I'm correct by cheating here. So we have 3.04 times 2.9. Good. 8816. Okay. All right. So after I'm done with the basic multiplication, let me move this out of our way. Then I got to deal with the decimals. Okay. And dealing with the decimals, let me use a different color. I have to count how many decimals I have on the top. So I count how many decimal places I have to bump on the top to get rid of my decimals. So as you can see, I have 1 bump here, 2 bumps here, and then I have another bump here. Okay, so that's 2 and 1 for a total of 3. Okay, so I had to bump the decimal 3 times on the top. So then I have to bump the decimal 3 times on the bottom to bring it back in, just like that. Okay, and my decimal place goes there. I get 8.816. Okay, so multiplying with or without a decimal is more or less the same. Just if I have a decimal at the very end, I got to bump it out. Okay, so I bump it out at the beginning and back in at the end. Okay, that's the only change from doing normal multiplication. You are going to be using decimals today in your multiplication, so you need to remember that. Okay, going back here too, we do one more example of multiplying with a decimal. So let's say we have 5.02 times, let's see here, let's keep it easy. Let's say 5.51. Okay? Again, I stack them on top of each other here. Doesn't matter which one's first and which one's second. Okay? All right, so I first do the ones. I get 2, 0, 5. Great. Placeholder 0. Okay, now I'm looking at my 5 here. You know what? Let me use a different color. I think that would be smart. And then we don't get as confused. Okay? Okay. So I have 5 times 2 is 10. 5 times 0 is 0 plus the 1. 5 times 5 is 25. Okay, good. Now I have to add 2 placeholder zeros here, just like that. Okay, I don't know where that little dot came from. Can I delete it? Yay, goodbye. Okay, and then, so now I do 5 times 2 is 10. Okay, 5 times 0 is 0 plus another 1. There we go. 5 times 5 is 25. I kind of have to keep it all lined up. So I know here, this is 2. That's 0. That's 6. That's 6. That's 7. And that's 2. Okay? Now, just like we did previously, okay, I have to mess with my decimals. So I have to, on the top, I have to count how many I have to bump it out. And I have to bump it in an equal number of times in the bottom. So I go 1, 2. Oh, sorry, my dog is trying to say hi there. He's looking out my window. Ah, he destroyed my screen. Here, let me show you. It's kind of funny. Is he there? Come on back, buddy. Come on back. Oh, he left. All right. Anyway, I thought that'd be fun, but it's not. Okay, there we go. So I have to bump it twice on the top, twice on the bottom for a total of 2 and 2, which makes 4. And so I have to bump it back in 4 times the bottom. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Just like so. And so my final answer is going to be, for this little problem, 27.6602. Okay, that's how I do the multiplication with a decimal. Okay, and so now we need to make sure that you remember how to do division with a decimal. Let's do it. Okay, so normally we would have like a problem that is like 14 divided by 7. Okay, and you would tell me, oh, or that's not a 7, that's a 2. Getting ahead of myself here. 14 divided by a 7, and you'd say, oh, well, that's a 2, Mr. Real Cool. Okay, but if we change it up, well, I guess first another way to write that, 14 divided by 7 gives us 2. Nice. Okay, what if we have 1.4 divided by 7? Okay, that changes it. Okay, and again, this is review, so you should have seen this before in the past. If you're bored, you can fast forward the video just a little bit because this is all we're doing. I'm just reviewing so you don't get tripped up. Okay, so we have to set it up in the same way. Okay, now when we have the decimal here, wherever the decimal is down here has to go up there. Okay, so I throw the decimal up there, just like so. Okay, and now, whoops, I need to change color. Good. Now I say 7 goes into 1 0 times. Nice. Okay. 7 goes into 14 twice. 2 times 7 is another 14. I subtract and I'm done. So the answer is 0.2. Okay. So the answer right here is not, I can't figure it out. The answer is 0.2. Okay. Let's do one more sample. Okay. Let's say 3, 5.7 divided by 7, just like that. Okay, we put the 35.7 or 35.7 over there, divided by 7. Okay, 7 goes into 3, 0 times. 7 goes into 35, 5 times. We subtract, we get our 0. We drop down the other 7. 7 goes into 7. Oh, I almost forgot right here. Okay. My decimal has to show up right up there. Okay, 7 goes into 7. Once, 7, and we subtract 0. So the answer is here. So my answer is 5.1. Okay, so again, that's how we multiply and divide with decimals. So tonight's homework is the exact same homework that you did last night. It's the same kind of worksheet, except this one has decimals on it, so it's just that much harder. So you have to remember everything that we learned about triangles, everything we learned about rectangles, and then you have to combine it with your knowledge of being able to calculate with decimals. And that is it for your homework for tonight for, what is it today? It's week 2, day 3. All right, have a great one. Goodbye. Recording. So today is, gosh, this keeps creaking. Today is week 2, day number 1, 2, I think it's 3. Is it? Let me double check. Yep, week 2, day 3. Okay, we're working with group 2. I just touched my face again. Let's be honest, yesterday's lesson was pretty rough, guys, so I'm going to try to be a little bit smoother. Today, I'm wearing the same shirt because I'm recording this about 15 minutes after I finished recording yesterday's. So I'm going to do my best with you guys. All right, so today is the last day that we are just working through problems, and then we have some general solving systems stuff for you guys to do for tomorrow. And then on the last day, on day 5, I am sending home problems for you to do, okay, on your own. All right, so today is the last day that you don't really have any homework other than watching and listening to me. So let's go ahead and get to it. Okay. All right, so as you see here, again, we're still solving equations, systems of equations in methods that make them similar to real world. We try to write the verbal model, try to assign our labels, create the system, and then solve the system. We have 4 methods: guess and check, which we actually used yesterday, graphing, substitution, and elimination, which some people call combination. Okay, we have one practice problem that we are just going to read through, and then we're going to start doing them together again. Okay, all right, so here's our practice problem. Choice of 2 jobs. You are offered 2 different jobs selling dental supplies. One has an annual salary of $20,000 plus a year-end bonus of 1% of your total sales. The other has a salary of $15,000 plus a year-end bonus of 2% of your total sales. How much would you have to sell to earn the same amount in each job? Okay, so job A, total earnings, job A plus 1% times total sales, job B, total earnings, job B, salary plus 2% times total sales. Okay, and so total earnings are Y, total sales are X. Okay, salary for job A is 20, salary for job B is 15. Okay, and so we have this. Let's see here. So we got Y equals 20,000 plus 0.01x. And this system is a good candidate for a solution by graphing or by substitution. You must sell about $500,000 in dental supplies to earn the same amount in each job. If you think you can sell $800,000 in supplies, which job would you take? Okay, and so here is the dollars earned and then sales in thousands of dollars. Okay, so we have 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 6,000, 600, 700,000, and then 800,000. And so if you thought that you were going to make $800,000 or you were going to sell $800,000, it would make more sense right here to choose job B, because your salary, your dollars earned, would be higher. Okay, and so kids, if any of you grow up and do any kind of sales, having a commission is kind of a good thing. And you might think these sound like big numbers, but really when you're in sales, they're not huge unless you're selling something that's really inexpensive. All right, so that's it for that. Let's jump back to yesterday's problem that we left out, which was Amber's fabulous house. Okay, so Amber's fabulous house has a rectangular yard for all her crazy animals. The perimeter of the rectangle is 22 meters, and the perimeter of the triangle is 12 meters. Find the dimensions of the rectangular yard. Okay, so we have length on the bottom, length over 2 right here. So this triangle is half of the length right here. Okay, that's what it's telling us. And then we have the width right here. Okay, and the perimeter of her rectangle is 22 meters. Okay, perimeter of the triangle is 12 meters. So let's go ahead and try to work through this together. I apologize if you hear some yard sounds in the background. I have my friend is helping me with the disgusting yard. Oh, whoops, wrong way. Okay, So let's go ahead and do this here. So again, we know that the perimeter of the rectangle is 22 meters. Okay, and so her yard has a perimeter of 22, and that perimeter, oops, let me go full screen here. The perimeter of 22 is the 2 lengths plus 2 widths equals 22. Okay, so that's the first part there. And then for a triangle here, the perimeter of the triangle is 12 meters. Okay, find the dimensions of the rectangular yard. Okay, so we have 12 meters here. And for the triangle, we have width, okay, plus length divided by 2. Width plus length divided by 2. Do we have to get all fancy and go Pythagorean theorem here? A squared plus b squared equals c squared? Or is there a way to do this without? Oh, wait, no. It gives us the hypotenuse of the triangle right here. This is 5 meters, okay? So this long side of the triangle right there, this long side is already 5 meters, so that makes it a lot simpler, okay? So we know that this is 5, okay? So now we have these two systems that we have to solve. Okay, let's see here. What is the easiest way to solve here? I think I would like to go with substitution on this one. Okay, so we're going to sub in, and let's see here. The length, do you guys see the length right here is like on top of a fraction? So I don't want to sub in the length. Let's solve for W, because W is like out in the open right there, okay? And since W is out in the open right here, I'm going to solve for this W up here, and then we're going to use it to plug into the second one down there, okay? All right, so we have 2L, I'm working with the first equation, plus 2W equals 22. All right, we're just solving for W. This should be pretty straightforward. Take away 2L, take away 2L, great. That cancels out there, okay? 2W equals negative 2L plus 22. And so we divide both sides by 2. That cancels that out, so we get W. Now remember, the 2 is dividing into this, and it's dividing into this, so we can't just do 1, okay? So negative 2L right here divided by 2 gives us just negative L plus, and then 22 divided by 2 gives us 11. So we know that W equals negative L plus 11, okay? W equals negative L plus 11. All right, now again, we can use that to plug into the W in the second equation. So the second equation is W plus L over 2 plus 5 equals 12. W plus L over 2 plus 5 equals 12. All right. Let's do that. And then what was it? Oh, whoops, keep on moving. Okay, so, and then W, as you saw up here, equals that. So we have to plug this in. Okay, so this part needs to be plugged in over here now. Okay. Oh, I don't know if you guys heard that, but I just got a call coming in, so I apologize for the noise. Plus L. When that call came in from Ms. Nikki, I didn't look up at the screen and didn't see that you guys were not able to see what I was doing. So let me go back and explain what I just did. Okay. All right. So here's where I think we left. No, this is way off. Oh, wait. Here we go. Okay. So here's where we were before. Okay. And so let me just use a color here. I will use some yellow, okay? All right, so we plugged it in here, okay, and it became this. So W became the negative L plus 11, okay? And then we went through and we did the math. We combined the 11 and the 5. That gave us 16 right there, okay? And then the L over 2, take away L. L over 2 can turn into 1/2 times L. It's the same thing, okay? And then 1/2 times L is basically 1/2 L, okay? And so we popped 1/2 L back in there. So 1/2 L, take away L, plus 16 equals 12, okay? So 1/2 L, take away L, gives us negative 1/2 L. We minus 16 from both sides, and then we just had negative 1/2 L, and then negative 4. And so we multiplied both sides by a negative 2, as you can see there. And we got L equals 8, okay? So L equals 8. So going back, my windows are screwed up after that call. Okay. So if L equals 8, right down there, okay, then we are well on our way to figuring out what the dimensions of the rectangular yard are, okay? So let me try to find my window. Here we go. All right, you know what? This is distracting me. I'm going to rearrange my windows. You guys can see what I'm doing there. There we go. Okay. And I got to shut my email down so you guys can't see all of my wonderful discounts and other things that I'm getting. Okay. All right, so we know what the length is, okay, and length is 8. So now I can just plug her back in up here. Okay, let me go back to black. Cool. Okay, so if L equals 8, I can simply plug it back in right up here. Okay, so I have 8 times 2, because I'm plugging in from the top equation, plus 2W equals 22. This gives us 16 plus 2W equals 22. I'm writing super tiny, so I apologize, and it's hard to read a little bit. Okay, that cancels that out. So then 2W equals, and then 22 take away 16 right there. 22 take away 16. That gives us what? 4, 6. 6. Okay, we divide both sides by 2. W equals 3. Okay. So L equals 8 and W equals 3. So her yard has a length of 8 meters, which is like 25 feet, give or take, and a width of 3 meters, which is like 10 feet. So it's not a bad little yard for a couple bunnies and other things that Amber has, right? There we go. All right, so Amber, that's your yard for maybe your first house or condo or whatever. All right, so that's our first problem for the day, catching up from yesterday. All right, next one. A dorm room at Aiden's College of Marine Biology seems small. The room is rectangular and has a perimeter of 42 feet. The room is 4 feet longer than it is wide. What are the dimensions of the room? Okay, so the room is rectangular and has a perimeter of 42 feet. So let's kind of take a look at that first. Okay, so we have a rectangular room, P equals 42. All right, and so that would give us our first equation. So if we know the perimeter is 42, we know 2 times the length plus 2 times the width gives us 42. Nice. Okay. Then next, the room is 4 feet longer than it is wide. So the length, the width plus 4 equals the length, because it's 4 feet longer than wide. So width plus 4 equals length. So let's write that down. Width plus 4 equals length. Okay, and these are our measurements for his dorm room. Okay, so I think that we can actually do some super easy substitution here, because we already know what L is. L equals that. And so that makes it like very nice for us. Okay, so we can just plug in that. So from the first equation, I'm going to take 2, plug in what the length equals, width plus 4, okay, plus 2W equals 42. And let's solve for W. Bam, bam, we rainbowed out. 2W plus 8 plus 2W equals 42. We can combine our 2W's there. 4W plus 8 equals 42. We can subtract out our 8. 4W. Let's see here. What does 42 take away? That's like 34. Okay. We divide both sides by 4. 4, 4. And then W gives us, what is that? 32 is 8. Oh, we have to do real math. Okay. 34, 4. Okay. So we do 8. That would give us 32. Yeah. So it'd be 2. And so that would give us 2 over 4, or 8.5. Okay, width is 8 and 1/2. Where are we here? So, looks like width is 8.5. So if the width is 8.5, okay, and the width plus 4 gives us the length should be 12.5, okay? And the perimeter needs to be 42 now. So let's see if we can get 42, because if we did, then we just solved it very quickly, okay? 12.5 plus 12.5. And, you know, you could do this with multiplication, then addition, however you want. Just for simplicity, we're doing it like this. Okay, so all of these combine and give us a 2 up here. So it'd be 2 plus 2 is 4 plus 2 is 6. And then 8 plus 8 is 16. And then 16 plus 6 gives us 22. And then 2 plus 1, it gives us 4, 42. Okay, that is correct. So again, we know that for this specific problem, let me put it in red, the width, okay, is 8.5, and the length is 12.5. That is a small room, but when Aiden's in college, he's going to be too busy studying in the library and hanging out with friends, doing fun stuff. He's not going to spend much time in that room anyway. So, all right, so that was that problem. Okay, let's see here. How many more do we have? Okay, let's just do this last one, because this one is a beast. And for beastly problems, we have our friend Lucy. So, to calculate absolute zero, the complete absence of heat, Lucy uses the following procedure. First, Lucy takes several readings for the volume and temperature of 3 gases. We have carbon, what is that, methane, water, steam, and nitrous oxide, as shown in the graph. Then she finds a linear equation that relates the volume in liters and the temperature in degrees Celsius of each gas. The measurements are taken only at temperatures for which the compounds are gases, shown as the solid part of each line in the graph. Remember from science class that you can actually get it really you can change the temperature and turn things from 3 different states. So these are only as gases. Okay. As shown as the solid parts of the graph. However, if each line is extended as shown by the dashed part, all 3 lines intersect at a common point, which is called absolute zero. What is absolute zero on the Celsius scale? Okay. So we have these 3 lines right here. Okay. Now, to solve this problem, okay, we already have our system of equations here, which is super cool, okay? What we can do is we can cheat using our technology. And since you keep your iPads when you leave Da Academy, okay, and since technology is everywhere, I highly recommend cheating and using your tech, okay? Because this tech is with you everywhere anyway, so there's no reason not to use it. Okay, there's never going to be a time where you are without it. So we're going to replace the t with x for the purposes of our graphing calculator. And I'm going to type in negative 2x plus 320y equals 546. Equals 546. Okay. All right, that ought to do it. Wait, is that correct? It's 546.4. All right, kids, I know you can't see this, but let me show you. Do you see this line right here? Okay, I'm a little concerned because, let's see here. So on this right here, we're going on a scale to 300, okay? So you see on the y-axis, we're only going up to 6. But on the x-axis, we're going all the way back to negative 300, all the way up to positive 300, okay? So that means on this graph right here, I have to do something similar. So I'm going to keep it, let's see here, can I change my scale manually? Is it under settings? Graphics, show axes. Okay, Okay, if we do standard view, let's try a zoom to fit. Interesting. Okay. Distance or length. Okay, let's see what this is here. Oh, good. Okay. So the zoom to fit feature helped me. If you're using like a TI-84 calculator, you have to go into range and figure that out. Okay. All right. But right here, we have 6, and we're going all the way back to negative 300. And so if you look at it here, like my center point, my origin point is 0, 0 right here. Okay. And so that actually looks close to correct here. Okay. All right, so we got that first equation in. That's negative 2t, which is negative 2x, plus 320y equals 546.4. Okay, oh, you can't see it over here. Let's. I'm trying to press it with the mouse. Okay, negative 2x plus 320y equals 546.4. Yep. Okay, sorry guys, I'm having to be like interestingly ambidextrous here because I'm using my right and left. Okay. Plus, okay, so negative x plus 228y equals 273.2, 273.2. Okay, good. By the way, guys, as soon as we're done here, let me show you what calculator I'm using on the iPad because it's very helpful for any of you who don't have this already. So negative 3x plus 1872y equals 819.6. 819.6. Okay, good. Okay. And you guys can see back here, okay, what I got. By the way, this graphing calculator is free, so that's really nice. And so all 3 of my lines, which Lucy figured out for these 3 different gases, all intersect at this point, okay? So the root intersect is negative 273.2, comma 0. So on my y-axis, I hit absolute 0 when the lines intersect at negative 273.2. So with this problem, okay, as you see, the volume in liters is on the y-axis here, so I'm getting down to 0. And then the degrees in centigrade, okay, equal negative 273.2, right there, where those intersect. So the answer would be, whoops, what am I doing? There we go. The answer would be in degrees centigrade, negative 273 point what? 273.2. And that's degrees Celsius, okay? So that would be the answer to that problem. Oh, whoops, you can't even see what I'm writing here. I'm going back and forth. Yeah, see? Just like that. I'm getting better. We're going to be doing this for another month, apparently, so negative 273.2. Okay? All right. That question went pretty quick because we were able to just use our graph. We didn't actually have to do any math because they gave us our system of equations. Kids, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. If they give you the system of equations, use them. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. Okay. So that's it for today's math class. I hope today's lesson was a little bit shorter, and I hope that you are getting the hang of this by now. Tomorrow, we still have like 1 or 2 problems left, unfortunately, but I want to kind of condense this lesson, make it a little bit shorter. So tomorrow, you have a worksheet full of systems of equations. I don't know why that's popping up. Anyway, you have, oh, there we go again, a worksheet full of systems of equations and whatnot that you have to solve, and we'll be doing one problem together. So tomorrow you actually have to do work. You can't just watch me mess up the work. All right, hope you're doing great, guys. That was it for day 3.